So I think we're good to start. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. I know we're all super busy. This session is going to be awesome. I'm really excited about it. The topic is sell, stay, or partner, how to build a practice worth buying, whichever path you choose. And this is a DSN and Flagship Specialty Partners conversation. So quick introductions, and then I will get out of the way. But my name is Isaac, and I help run marketing at DSN Software. We're with Jason Lockwood, who runs Flagship Specialty Partners as their CEO. Before Flagship, Jason was the CEO of ClearChoice Dental Implant Centers and the CEO of Specialty Smile Partners. So he's led and grown platforms across multiple specialties. Also with us is Sam Munakl, who's our CEO here at DSN. Sam is a cybersecurity expert and systems engineer by background, and he's the driving force behind our cloud and AI platform. Where Jason brings the deal and buy side view, Sam brings a lot of the operator and technology perspective and what it actually takes to run a practice that's ready for any of these three paths. So again, super excited. Thank you all for joining. Last piece of housekeeping is we're recording the session, so if you miss a part of it, no worries. We'll send it around. So with that, I will let the experts take over. I hope you all enjoy it.
Thank you, Isaac, for the incredible intro, and I appreciate your time today, Jason, here, with us. So I want to say, there was a lot in the oral surgery industry over the last 5, 6 years, a lot of change, a lot of questions about, acquisition, the DSO rising force on acquiring practices and consolidation versus private practice. So we would love to hear your perspective on it live. You're in the middle of all of it. You see a lot of deals. You talk to a lot of doctors. You have tremendous experience in the industry, and you have done this a few times across different portfolio. So what do you think? What's going on?
Listen, there's never a dull day in the DSO space. I fell into this, as you mentioned, Isaac, about 15 years ago, not knowing anything about dentistry. In fact, the exact question I got asked by Catterton Equity, which was the private equity partner that first partnered with ClearChoice, was, "Hey, Jason, what do you know about dental implants?" And I gave an honest answer. I said, "Absolutely nothing." They said, "That's okay. You live in Colorado. This company's in Colorado. Do you want to take a look at it?" So it's been a trial by fire for 15 years, more or less. Had the opportunity to work with hundreds of doctors and dentists of different, as you said, different flavors: orthodontists, pediatric dentists, prosthodontists, and now oral surgeons. So it's been a joy. It keeps me on my toes. Like I said, there's never a dull day. We've gone through many cycles. We're going through a cycle right now. I'm sure we'll talk about it as we go through the presentation. So I've enjoyed working with DSN. If I could give a few comments on that. I've only been here at Flagship for 2.5 years, but our company, Flagship Specialty Partners, which was the old Carolinas Centers for Oral and Facial Surgery, CCOFS, has been with DSN even longer. I think probably going on 5 years. And so might have even been, if I understand it correctly, the very first practice to deploy DSN Cloud. And so it's been a good journey, and I'm happy to sort of share whatever my perspective is, and hopefully that's of value on today's webinar, and also kind of share my experience if anybody's interested with DSN. It's been a good partnership. I think we've grown together, and I see a lot of parallels of what I saw in the orthodontic space, which one could argue went through consolidation, let's say 5 or 6 years faster or earlier than oral surgery. And in some cases, you see these patterns and how the industry's developed. So happy to talk about that as we jump in as well.
So, the question right now and it has been, and obviously everybody knows that for oral surgery, especially in the COVID time, there was a lot of concern for a lot of surgeons that it is cool about like, hey, like doctors want to run their practice versus some of them just really care about the patients. They want to focus on the patient care. They want to focus on what they know best, surgery. So the management side of that, some of them are very ambitious. They want to grow the practice. They want to buy more. They want to create their own so-called DSO. So what do you see out there? Like what's the questions that a lot of surgeons come to you with? Do I sell? Do I stay? What's going on with the DSO market? What should we do?
Yeah, great question. I would first give a shout out to the longtime practice administrator and president of CCOFS, a guy named Danny Catola. I think he might even be listening in on today's call. Many people in the industry probably know Danny. He's been around helping doctors answer that very question for nearly 3 decades. And so I've learned a lot about how I would answer that question from Danny. And he always approached it from a very heartfelt standpoint of, all right, here's what I've seen. Here's what I've seen work. Here's what I haven't seen not work. And everybody has to make their own choices. There's no wrong choice. It's whatever's right for you. You've devoted your life or a good portion of your life to building your practice. And so if we can at all be helpful to helping you get to the right outcome for you and the right journey along the way, then that generally works out for everybody. So first, shout out to Danny Catola, a great resource and asset to the industry. You're absolutely right that some people just really want to focus on patient care, and some really do sort of run a constant spreadsheet in their head about what their practice is worth. It might very well be the most valuable asset on their personal balance sheet if they were to calculate their net worth. It's not like the old days when you would go to one of the many accountants or consultants and they would say, your practice is typically worth 60 to 80% of collections. And here's how we hand these practices down from generation to generation. It's always been funny to me that oral surgery was one of the most socialist-minded professions out there, that you would come out of school, and because you've been in school for, say, 12 years straight, not even taking summers off, you come in as an associate, and at the end of your second year, it's time to become partner. I think, having worked in a lot of industries, it's remarkable how short that apprentice period is. It's, okay, great. You work out, we like you, you like us, it's good for the family, this is going to be a good long-term home. We're going to make you a full partner. And then we're going to split everything up evenly. And when it comes time for you to sell, you're going to sell to the next generation for 60 to 80% of collections. And they'll do that buy-in over, pick a number, 3 to 5 years. But then you brought in private equity. When I say brought in, it happened. Private equity discovered a model to be able to invest in this. And so all of a sudden, practice valuations have skyrocketed. And we're no longer valuing practices off of collections and focused on handing it down from generation to generation. It's now, oh my gosh, this is now suddenly worth 250% of collections. And really that now depends on this number we all talk about called EBITDA, which we don't certainly want to dwell on, but is just a measure of cash flow. So what I would say to try to answer your question is, because it is now a very valuable asset, right? I mean, I would love it. If any of you are looking to sell, or not sell, that's not even really the right term. It should be affiliate. The correct term is, if you are looking to affiliate your practice with a management company or a dental service organization like us, and it's a growing, successful practice, and 60 to 80% of collection sounds like a good number, then I am open any time of day, any day of the week to have that conversation. But the reality is it's changed. But it's not easy. It's not as easy as it was, say, 5-6 years ago. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, where there was so much private equity money flowing into this space that the race was on, and there wasn't as much diligence, and there just wasn't as much, really discretion as should be. And that has had its ramifications, right? This industry, not necessarily oral surgery, but some of the other specialties or general dentistry, have faced the pain of restructuring, and so that has a dampening effect on private equity wanting to rush in. So whether you are in a window, not in a window, just focused on patient care, I would say anybody, you owe it to yourself to know what the options are in this current market, and to know that market has its ebbs and flows. And as the way the slide is laid out, right, you could choose to sell, which I prefer to use the term affiliate just because it's more accurate, because you may not be the owner of your practice, but it's always going to be a doctor or a dentist who owns the practice. You may merge as part of a statewide practice, or you might have your own, but in essence, it's the equivalent of selling. At least the economic value of your practice is now being rolled up to some other entity. Obviously, staying, there's nothing wrong with continuing to practice, building a great group. And you may decide that you want to hand it down to the next generation. The challenge, and maybe this is too much detail, but for doctors who are coming out of school with ever more debt and have delayed gratification on so many fronts, I hear it all the time. They delayed getting married, they delayed buying a house, they didn't buy a car, they really weren't able to really live a full life. They're 30 years old. And now the prospect is, okay, I'm going to go borrow $2 million to buy into a practice. It's changed, right? Because if that existing practice owner or group of practice owners have a successful practice, it's probably worth several $1 million. Could be in the tens of millions of dollars. And so if that new associate were to come in at a market value price, they'd have to take out some really significant loans. So the staying, right, even if that's your goal, as you think about eventual retirement, how you value that practice and what your transition plan is not as easy as it perhaps was 10 or 20 years ago. But the good news is it's probably worth a lot more. And then finally, partner. I think I kind of think of the way this distinction, I'd make the difference between sell and partner is whether you go with a JV model. So many people are familiar with a joint venture model where you actually have an LLC at, say, your local city, state, or even individual practice level, and you're still able to enjoy direct economic benefit from your individual practice. And that's done generally through what's called a joint venture or a sub DSO model. And that's what ClearChoice was back in the day. Before it sold to Aspen, ClearChoice would have a local LLC as well as the management company, and you could hold equity at either level. So there are a variety of different flavors of what it looks like to eventually monetize this significant asset that you've built over your career. So hopefully that's responsive to your question, Sam. Maybe a little too much detail on the mechanics of.
No, that's great. I'm sure everybody here have the same kind of want to hear as much detail. So I want to just touch on one more point here. What do you think usually from the doctors you talk to, and what is the drive behind their decision to partner usually, or the most common drive? What is the most common concern that they have usually from partnering? Because there's a lot of horror stories too.
For sure. Well, okay, so obviously I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the financial aspect wasn't, for many, many doctors, the most significant, right? Whether that's the political thing to say or not, that is often the case, the number one consideration of, I have this thing that's worth, it's my retirement, it's my, what I'm going to hand down to my children. It means something, and that's a significant a consideration. And there's lots of things that you'd want to consider around how much you roll over to the equity of the new entity you're part of, how much is deferred, whether there's an earnout or a clawback, and how long do I have to commit to working, and what are the penalties if I leave early. So there's definitely we could talk for quite a while about how to think about the economics of a transaction, regardless of what it looks like, whether it's sale to a corporate, sale to a more support center oriented group like us, or a joint venture. Number two, outside of the money, I think is a real question about control and where the line is drawn. I think rightfully so, surgeons should be asking themselves, hey, what are the non-negotiables of what must change? I accept that my payroll system is going to change. In fact, I'm happy that the payroll, I don't want to have to deal with that, right? They might actually be super happy that they don't have to worry about HR and maybe the fact that somebody else is going to recruit staff, interview staff, train staff. Great. That sounds awesome because I didn't really love doing that anyway. RCM oftentimes can be a pain point that they're looking to get help with. Consider going in network, deal with claims, deal with adjudication, all of that. We could keep going down the list. Some are looking for help on marketing. The truth of the matter is we're largely a referral marketing type of specialty. And so it falls on someone to go out and call on the general dentists, the orthodontists, the pediatric dentists to convince them that you're the right home for their patients, and that we're going to take great care. And we're going to communicate amazingly, and we're going to coordinate care, all that. Some get to a point in their career where they're not that excited about continuing to do that. And because those other specialties are continuously changing over generation to generation, you have to stay on top of it. Otherwise, your referral sources retire and the next associate finds someone else to refer to. So there are, if I look at all the functions in what we do as a DSO, HR, finance, IT, marketing, facilities, keep going down the list, to different degrees, a lot of doctors are excited to be able to be freed of the responsibility and the burden of having to do those. But it does come also with a concern, because sometimes you hit what I'll say is the third rail. They're like, hey, I wanted to get rid of this stuff, but this, I absolutely want complete autonomy and the ability to do it my way. And I would say that almost all DSOs are good about respecting the clinical line. It's never my place. I'm not a doctor. I did not go to school for this. I don't try to, play armchair surgeon. And, we all sometimes like to use the jargon because it's just it makes you feel like you're part of the club. But I think anybody who's been doing this a while knows, hey, there's a super clear line and you don't go over it, right? Whether it's the surgical theater, the surgical suite, or just simply, hey, that's clinical. That's not a decision that I'm going to, weigh in on. I think most of us have a good appreciation for that. But there are other things that are still near and dear to doctors' hearts. Are you going to tell me how to run my schedule? Are you going to tell me which days I have to be open? Are you going to tell me whether I can have a CRNA in the suite with me? Like, these are questions that everybody should be asking, because we're all kind of all over the place. Whether it's us or Beacon or US Oral Surgery, we all have our own strategy for how much autonomy individual offices have for that. Practice management software, which you guys being DSN is kind of perhaps one of the big topics of today, is I do see this changing quite a bit, that organizations such as us have to accept that we need to integrate operations, because the market, when we go to have a recap event, and that's what we call it, we don't think of it as selling the DSO, because at the end of the day, the DSO will continue on. It may change out its private equity partner. That's natural. The nature of private equity is they have to recycle their capital. Otherwise, they can't return it to their investors. And just as importantly, the partners in the private equity firm don't get their paycheck either. Like, they don't work for their salary. That keeps the wolves away. But what they're really playing for is that carried interest. And they don't get that carried interest unless they actually are able to have a transaction event. But the underlying company still has to carry on. And so you may sell a share of Apple, but Apple still is a company and it still goes on. So we call them recapitalizations for that reason. Oftentimes you're just called a recap. The market right now for recaps, put it this way, there's only one answer when the investment banker is preparing you for the roadshow. And they say, when I ask the question, have you consolidated practice management software? There's only one acceptable answer right now. That's yes. It's either we are already consolidated on practice management software, or we're in progress, and here's our calendar, here's our timeline, and by this date, we'll all be integrated. It wasn't always that way. 4 years ago, maybe because of COVID, zero interest rates forever, the industry had just developed where slap it together as fast as humanly possible, and we can just integrate it at the data warehouse level. And that was fine. As long as you had a Power BI dashboard that was put together by the data, geniuses, or by Accordion or somebody, they would say, okay, that's fine. As long as we can get integrated or consolidated financials, we're okay. That is not how it works anymore. You will absolutely pay a price when you go to recap. And we measure that as multiples for those who maybe are new to this space. What multiple of EBITDA is your enterprise value going to be based on? So having integrated practice management software, having it all in the cloud so that you're not dealing with 50 on-prem instances that can go down, are difficult to roll up. You don't have consolidated data with a single data schema that allows you to build, on top of it. That's a real problem. So I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've lived both worlds, right? I tried to run a DSO previous to this where we didn't integrate practice management software. And then we discovered, yes, we actually have to bite the bullet and do it. So that's a big one. It says here on, are you integrated? That's what that means, right? So that's what we have done. We've moved everybody. We still have a few to go onto DSN Cloud, and we'll continue to go down that path with new affiliates. I may have already made this point, maybe I didn't. Something to consider is when to start thinking about your transition plan. There's no question that if you wait until later in your career and you only are planning on working 5 more years, it will be held against you. I hate to say it, but that's just the financial reality. Is what assets is a DSO really buying? If you really think about it, right? Because in truth, the assets in the building, the chairs, the drills, the scope stand, like that stuff is nowhere near like the collateral required to even support the debt, let alone the valuation. So the hard assets of the organization are minimal. What's the goodwill of the practice? Well, that's even a tricky thing as well, right? Typically, oral surgery practices are named something generic, like such and such oral and facial surgery. Like there's not like Nike, Apple. It's not like the brand oftentimes has this sustainable institutional value. So then it comes down to your referral patterns. But remember, the referral patterns have to be kept vibrant because the referring doctors are changing over as they go through their generational change. So you may feel like you're the dominant player in a market. And believe me, I've seen this, I've lived it, where you might be 90% of all of the oral surgery in a market. And all it takes is a super hungry, ambitious, driven doctor to come in and completely destroy your long-standing referral network because they're prepared to give outstanding patient care, communicate amazing. The answer to can we get you in is always yes. And it's either today if you're in pain or tomorrow if you're an implant patient or anything else, right? I mean, that kind of drive, right? The moat that any oral surgery practice really has around it, if we're really honest with ourselves, actually isn't that big. Not against a super driven, hungry, attacking, in a good way attacking, not a bad way, young oral surgeon. So if you wait until the point where, because we've gotten into this mindset that I can always sell for 8x, 9x, whatever people have told you is that multiple of EBITDA. And honestly, there was a period where that was true. And unfortunately, I shouldn't say fortunately, unfortunately, depends on your perspective. That era is over. Maybe it'll come back. But if you want my personal opinion, it will be many years before sort of private equity licks its wounds long enough and forgets to get back to the go-go era of around 2018 through 2022, 2023, where they would just, we'll get to diligence in a bit, but as long as they had a rubber stamp seal of approval from some Q of E provider that said, yep, I think there's 2 million of EBITDA, I'll slap a multiple on it and count on multiple arbitrage, just meaning the difference between what I pay and what I'm valued at. That game was played for a long time quite successfully, but it's almost like a game of musical chairs, and the music stopped sometime around 2024. Sometimes in early 2024, the music stopped. And we can certainly talk about what I mean by that. So if I had to give advice, right, really be thoughtful about, okay, how good are your systems? Are they integrated? I would definitely advocate going cloud. If you have multiple offices, you shouldn't have multiple on-prem instances. Don't wait until you've got a limited window because they're going to count on you staying there and continuing to build the practice for a number of years. That absolutely affects your valuation. And then don't sleep on the quality of your systems because diligence is no joke now. It was there. I'm sure that would get me shot by some Q of E providers, but it was a joke there for a while and it isn't any longer. So sorry if I'm dwelling on that a little bit too long.
So,
Isaac, you'll have to just yank my chain if I'm talking too long about this stuff.
So I just like, because you shared a lot of incredible insights and a lot of amazing information, but let's say that, like obviously they decided to partner and they have, let's say like a lot of doctors say like, okay, now I'm using a dental software, which is a lot of them, like in the very beginning, they operate single location, couple location. They try to just never go to a specialty software, and that sometimes hit them on the RCM side. We all know that, and they don't see the value of maybe using a fully compliant special software, or they stitch everything together, and now they are under a DSO umbrella, which is they need to have a standardized, incredible, good system working together. because they wanna think, yes, we're gonna exist for the next 20 years. So software change will carry some pain sometimes if that is not
Sure.
managed in there. So like so I want to say like pain versus gain. You talked about referrals a little bit as well. Right now I always tell people like also referrals now have expectation on the level of how you send them the image, how you communicate the treatment plan, how you build around all of that, especially the younger generation of general dentists. And when they refer a patient for you, they are expecting certain type of technology back, all that. So, what do you say to that? What do you say to standardizing? Of course, you said about the value on the software side. So, like, where do you see this kind of like debate about like we just needed to make it work versus like, hey, we need to have like a one system cloud base, the risk behind that,
Yeah.
and
Well, I mean, I think part of it is just I think consumer expectations continue to advance. The next generation, I mean, I'm 52, and so in some regards I feel over the hill, but I have 4 kids, and the concept of standing in a taxi line, calling to order, like these concepts are foreign to them, and I don't. I mean, this is never going to go backwards. And so I would say things like patient portal, patient communications, online forms, the seamlessness and the frictionlessness of your interactions with both patients and referral partners. I can't emphasize enough the seamlessness with which you communicate with referral partners is absolutely critical. Your ability to predict what the patient's actually going to owe. Let's face it, oral surgery is the most complicated because we're oftentimes dealing with both medical and dental. That's something at Flagship we especially deal with because we do so much, total joint replacement and orthodontic surgery in office. So trying to estimate what the patient's really going to owe after multiple insurances have coordinated benefits, it's not easy, but it's key to case conversion. It's key to getting your referral partners comfortable to send you their patients. So the quality of your systems, much like Amazon, right? We don't even realize just how seamless it's become to just click that and, before you know it, it shows up on your doorstep. And they obsessed about every little detail, the speed of how quickly the web page loaded. How do I remove all the steps? So we try as best we can to push the envelope on process improvement, work with you guys to offer suggestions on what we think the software can do for us. But yeah, I think just the old world of hanging out a shingle and saying, well, we're the surgeons, they're going to send us all these patients. I would say there's another key factor there, which again isn't necessarily about the software, but it raises the bar as to how good you have to be. How many dentists are doing their own implants, right? We saw this in orthodontic for sure, right, with clear aligner therapy, but we're also seeing it in oral surgery. How many are doing implants? How many are starting to tackle more complex extractions, what we would call the dental alveolar sphere? If I could name one megatrend that the big DSOs, the big general dentistry DSOs are pursuing, whether it's Heartland or Pacific, and what's Smile Brands, the number one megatrend I see is them trying to hold on to their specialty revenue as much as possible. So we have got to be at the absolute top of our game. There was just an article, or I think you'd call it a journal article in the Journal of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery. I forget the surgeon's name, but urging all of us, and not me personally, but urging oral surgeons, practice at the highest level of your full scope that you're comfortable with, because most people don't know that more than half of all of Pacific Dental Services revenue is specialty revenue. Specialty revenue. So they've already made the flip. They do more specialty than they do general dentistry. And this number will blow people's minds. How many surgeons work for Pacific Dental? As my understanding, it's over 300. I don't know the exact numbers, but that might put it as big or bigger than U.S. oral surgery. And so I think if you're like, oh my God, that's a wake-up call. That is such a wake-up call that we have got to be at the absolute highest level of our game to demonstrate the superior value of coming to a specialist where we're obviously take care of the clinical, but everything else about that experience is so good that instead of trying to fumble through it themselves, take some weekend courses, and, hey, why not try an all on four? And I'm not bad mouthing general dentists who do that. What I'm trying to say is we have to be that much better that instead of going down that path, which is probably the mega trend that I'm seeing in general dentistry DSOs, they come back to the specialty and they say, no, I send my implant cases to, Dr. Smith over at CCOFS because X, Y, Z, and so forth. So everything you've got here, I think, is accurate, right? I mean, not just so that you collect the money, right, on billing and AR visibility, but think about the patient experience. Your ability to estimate accurately upfront, taking into account their benefits and eligibility, calculate it correctly, and then still get them to say yes to treatment because it's the right thing for the patient. Billing and AR visibility is critically important for both us as the practice and for the patient. So I think all the things you listed here are spot on for how we up our game, and technology is a huge piece of that. It makes the job easier for our team to deliver great care.
And I want to say and I'm very proud about the partnership, obviously, between DSN and Flagship. And there was a lot of key things that Flagship have done to make it just more seamless and easy, to partner with Flagship, obviously, from a software standpoint. And this is, other than you called it in the very beginning, you all were one of the first practices to go live with DSN Cloud. You guys believed in it. You all prepared. You have the right resources for the practice. You do a lot up front. You prepare the practice for all of it. So what do you, what do you say about how you guys make the decision? How do you guys do the team? And how do you examine all of that to make it easier for your practices to make it happen?
You mean like bringing a clinic or an office onto DSN Cloud? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Well, I come from a lean manufacturing background, for those who are familiar with the Toyota production system. So I would like to think that we start with understand your existing process, right? Don't assume that don't assume that, okay, we immediately know how to do it better. Always go in, observe, be curious, be likable, take the time to understand how are you doing it today. And I will tell you that oftentimes you pick up little gems. You're like, ooh, wow, that might actually be something that we want to bring back to our belief of what best practice is, right? So we are always challenging ourselves to build our library of best practices. So you'd be remiss if you didn't start there. Don't assume that what everybody's doing that hasn't joined you is inferior, because oftentimes it's not. But the power of getting everybody onto the same platform is off the charts, because then you can actually internally benchmark on so many things, right? And the conversations that evolve between the doctors.
Yeah,
right?
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but what advantage that gives to you as an operator day to day, and to Flagship in general, being all
for sure. So for example, we have a doctor up in Virginia who wanted to pursue same-day surgeries. He had some colleagues from residency who were doing a great job with growing their practice, with doing same-day consult surgeries, doing all the pre-work up front with health checks and prepping them, all that, so that somebody could come in, have a consult, and go into surgery if they're clinically appropriate. And so he had phenomenal success, grew his practice nearly 40% in a single year. And that caught people's attention. But it's only going to catch their attention if they can actually see all of that data. And we can go into things like dashboards and visibility, but then be able to actually communicate on an even basis around, oh, show me how you did that in your schedule. Show me how your team did benefits eligibility reliably beforehand. Show me how you got them to tell you about their blood thinners, because I can't do the surgery if they don't tell me they're blood thinners. So how do you waterboard these patients between, what are the processes you follow in your system with online forms and a proactive outreach to make sure that by the time they show up, they're actually going to be a candidate for this on same-day surgery. So that's just like one minor example. But we could go down the line of anything that doctors say, hey, I'd like to explore that. I'd like to see how I can use that. It's so much easier if you can literally pull up in the same system in in a format and templates that they're familiar with, and say, okay, let me just walk you and your team. Because oftentimes it's not the doctor who's resistant to change, it's the team. And the team who's like, no, we've always done it this way. You're like, well, you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got, right? As the saying goes. So I feel like, yes, getting everybody onto, even if, and I'm not saying that this is the case, but even if the new process was like slightly less efficient, it is so much more made up. The reward for getting everybody on the same comparable program, and when I say program, I'm not just talking about the technology and the systems, I'm talking about processes, procedures, protocols. It dramatically outweighs what might be some marginal decline of, we've always done it this old way and we're going to be less efficient doing it in a new way. And for me, I don't think the trade-off is even, I would say it's always debatable, but I don't think it's a very close debate. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to say, like a lot of, people say about like their data and isolated system. Obviously, RCM is a big deal. I know, like you spent a lot of time, I would call you one of the experts in RCM. Like we lean a lot on you guys' expertise to guide us on the software side as well. So you guys do a tremendous job. So on the RCM side and having the migration to a cloud software, how that make an impact to, like the way that you all help, like with the practices you guys partner with?
Sure. Well, I mean, two ways. One is workflow. Because we're all in the same cloud-based system, can access it from anywhere, we're able to lean in the steps of the process where we can just do it more consistently, more efficiently, or with even a higher level of care than they're able to do it locally. Because let's face it, they have 15 things that they need to attend to on any given day, maybe 50 things. And I'm talking about the staff, the front desk staff, the office manager. If we're able to go and we just quickly walk the chain, benefits and eligibility, claim submission, EOB processing, AR adjudication, appeals, all that. There's very specific skills that if we're doing it at the world-class level, we're truly scrubbing those claims, putting them in the right order of operations, knowing the claim status, knowing what's waited too long, being able to evaluate that EOB. We've all seen the pain that can happen along that process. If we're able to deploy specialists who do nothing but that, and have a whole career path and can spend, their better part of their career doing that and specializing in it, man, we'd be doofuses if we can't do it better than all the offices doing it on their own. So that's just the basic workflow. Hopefully we can improve the workflow, which gets the doctors paid, get paid at a higher level of collections ratio is what we call it, and sooner. And avoids recoupments and audits and all those other things, because let's face it, the insurance companies are trying to turn those things into profit centers. And so if they can find an excuse to come back after you after a couple of years and try to get some sort of audit from a SIU group, then they will. And that becomes more of an issue, frankly, as a DSO, because we're a bigger target. And so they're more likely to come after us than they are an individual dentist or an individual doctor. But these are the things that we have to consider when evaluating the benefit of having everybody on one platform. It helps us fight back. It helps us ensure that we're compliant with everything we're doing. The second one is actually oversight and data. Like, so if you would take Exparel, for example, Exparel, it's fantastic. As a parent of 4 daughters, it's great. Don't want to introduce opioids if I can avoid it. So having this non-opioid, a solution to pain management with third molars is great. But if you ask doctors how much they actually get paid for it, I think most are hard pressed to give you an honest answer. And you need to, because it's not cheap. And I'm not picking on the good folks at Pacira who make Exparel, but I should know it off the top of my head, but if you're paying a couple $100 in real cost for the actual drugs on a 4-quadrant Exparel, and you don't really know what insurance is paying, and you don't really know how much you should be charging the patient, or you just default to, well, I just tell them it's non-covered and I collect 100%. And these are not best practice, right? You should know. You should know Delta Dental is going to pay this, Blue Cross is going to pay that. And without, I get seamless data across the whole RCM landscape, it's hard to answer questions like that. Should we be using gel foam? There's all kinds of questions that we're able to answer because it's all in one common consistent data structure across lots of practices, across multiple states, some in network, some out of network. That's what I mean by internal benchmarking. Being able to compare and contrast how different doctors, all within the same family. So you don't have this conflict of interest. You don't have confidentiality issues as much because we're all part of the same family, just trying to be better as a group. I think it's a huge advantage. Consistent data,
If I want to go back to, I'll say like full circle in a way and say like, if the surgeons hearing us today, considering to partner in the near term or even the long term, how do they prepare in a way in every aspect, from technology aspect or maybe not even technology aspects, both, like to partner, how they can get more value, how they can come and bring value to the partner, to the DSO, whoever they decide to partner with. What do you have for them?
Fair question. I guess some practical take-home value, if you will. Go through your accounts, right? So one of the analyses that every Q of E provider is going to do these days is called a ZBA, a zero balance account analysis. And the way to think about that is they're going to pull all of your ledgers, all of your accounts receivable, and they're going to ask themselves, okay, what percentage of all the accounts on your books are at zero balance, right? And that simple ratio matters, because if you're sitting on, and I think it was mentioned in a slide, we don't need to go back, but if you find out that the majority of all the accounts they have on the books are still sitting either in credit balance status or have a positive balance, meaning money you still have to collect, believe it or not, both are problems, right? Because if you got a whole bunch of credits sitting out there, we have no choice but to think of those as either services yet to be rendered or refunds yet to be issued. Either way, it's going to result in some sort of holdback or value diminution for you when you go to value your practice. So even asking the question, right, of digging in, how do I get that data out of my system so that I can answer that question? And if you went to your office manager today and said, hey, I mean, this might even be the litmus test to start with, which is show me my accounts receivable. Okay, now let's look at it by account. And there might be 1,000 accounts. In our case, 20,000 accounts. What percentage of them are sitting in zero balance status? How old are the ones that aren't? Why are they still there? Because somebody's eventually going to look at that and either use it to question your EBITDA because it's really refunds that you needed to make, which are obviously a reduction of EBITDA, or it's services yet to be provided. Those can all result potentially in a retrade. And that's super painful, that you get into a letter of intent, you've signed, you've negotiated it, you've picked your partner, you've signed a letter of intent, and 2 months later, they're like, well, turns out this is not the number anymore. And you've put potentially your team, if you've told your team, you've put them through the difficulty or just let's just call it the, what's the right word? Emotional test that it will ultimately be, where you're like, hey, I've decided to sell my practice or affiliate. That's going to be an emotional test for your team on how they react to that. So a lot of doctors wait until the very end. So they've had to shoulder that burden entirely themselves. And they're the ones pulling reports as best they can. And they're the ones trying to explain it to accountants and Q of E providers and private equity guys or somebody like me. And we try to be gentle and we try to be kind in that process. But at the end of the day, we really do need those answers. So you can do yourself a favor if you make sure that that's cleaned up front. Because those questions, especially in this environment, for all the reasons that we talked about before, have to be asked and have to be answered. So I know that's just one particular thing, and maybe I'm dwelling on the financial side a little bit too much. We could also talk about case audits. DSOs worth their salt are evaluating anesthesia records and evaluating and saying, hey, can every case be 4 units? I guess it could be. Every single third molar case takes 46 minutes or more. That's entirely possible, but they hopefully are not overlapping, and the anesthesia records are there to support it. And that on your consultations, if you're doing extended consults, your time counseling is well documented. So these are just maybe a couple very, very specific practical things, and maybe they're too in the weeds for the discussion that we're having, but it all comes back to we can all fall into bad habits. in terms of kind of what's evolved over time. So it is hard sometimes to look with an objective, fresh set of eyes at your processes, at your data. I'm sure there's people out there that consult and will charge you a fee to kind of give you a third party evaluation of it. I'm not shilling for anybody in particular. But that's why I respect people like Danny so much, because he's just always been willing to give away this advice or help out and just dig in and say, hey, I spent an afternoon in your practice. Here's what I see. Not that I can volunteer Danny for a couple dozen site visits, but it's always been part of who he is and who we are. No sales pitch. Just try to get somebody who can give you a fresh look at some of these questions that I'm bringing up.
I've known Danny for over 10 years now, and he's been extremely kind and helpful for everybody I know. So yeah, I'll second that. So like I know we're not taking a lot of, like we're not taking QA yet, but we had an interesting question in the very beginning, and it was what's the thought on, and I know it's outside of oral surgery, but they are thinking about talking about perio in particular, and what kind of shift in the market. And there's a lot of talks about this multi-specialty model that's coming to even oral surgery. Like later on, there's going to be cross consolidation between perio and endo. And from a software perspective, I would say then picking an enterprise multi-specialty practice management software is essential, because it's going to happen the same thing. Like instead of changing and stitching so many softwares together, that one matter a lot. From a DSO perspective, what is your view on that?
Well, I don't know if this is a popular opinion, but I'll give one person's opinion. It's amazing to me that when I was in the ortho space, there became a very clear leader, and that became Cloud9. And I watched that happen. First it was with Smile Doctors, partnering with them, and they just got there first, and they made a lot of good decisions, right? So I can't speak for the entire ortho industry, but to my knowledge, Cloud9 has kind of become pretty much the game in town, because they really delivered on the needs of an orthodontic practice. I think oral surgery is a distinctly different business than ortho, is a different business than say pedo, and let's say perio. So I don't want to get over my skis, because I don't frankly know all that much about perio. I look at, a lot of people, this is also not a very popular opinion, a lot of people were selling the trifecta. You get pedo, ortho, and oral surgery all in the same group, and pedo feeds ortho, feeds oral surgery. If you are in a buy and build DSO, I think that is extraordinarily difficult to pull off, like crazy hard to pull off. And not just because the practice management software that you've got for pedo is different than ortho, is different than oral surgery, which may have been where your question was going. I'd have to leave it to like you guys on the software side to say, why can't you get all of those softwares to work? I can tell you from an operations standpoint and from a marketing standpoint, these are three very different games. And unfortunately, we've got a couple notable examples of DSOs that blew up that tried to just spin that game, right? The trifecta game, especially Dental Brands was probably the most notable example, where, it's really hard to get that much density in an individual market where the number of pedos that you have feeding ortho, feeding oral surgery is a significant enough percentage to that actually be a thing, right? I mean, we dominated Wisconsin when I was back at Specialty Smile Partners. And in our home market where we started of Eau Claire, we never got past the point of 23% of our ortho patients coming from our 8 practice pedo group. So you kind of have to I don't know, maybe that's taking it a tangent you didn't want to go, Sam, but my personal opinion is it is possible that the mega group general dentistry DSOs will gobble us all up. That is possible. Okay. But that's maybe a question you weren't asking, which is, will the Heartlands of the world and like I said, remember, Pacific Dental Services is over $3 billion in revenue, and more than half of it is specialty. It is entirely possible that they will, over time, not just do de novos, but also start to gobble up specialty groups. I can't predict that, but having been an operator in a number of different specialties in the dental space, I think it's extremely difficult at this stage of the game to say, I'm going to be really good at running multiple specialties. So
Fair.
you feel free to disagree with me and say, "Oh,
Yeah,
you know what,
fair.
you're
I
missing
want
it."
to
But
say, like, I want to stay in my lane and stay in the software side. What I on from the DSN standpoint, we want to provide solution where people need it. We are obviously like been in the oral surgery for a long time, and we are coming into perio and endo for our enterprise cloud now. And like if people want to run the modules together, we'll be able to support that. But the business decision on how they want to do that and how they want to handle it, I'll leave it to the expert and what market they want to go into. But like before we jump into like questions and take questions, and for anyone listening, please feel free to start writing down and giving us the questions. Takeaway, like what do you want people to leave with today? What is the takeaway that you want people to carry with them after this,
oh
Jason?
man, that's a pretty philosophical question. I'm going to have to. Not sure I was fully prepared for my my podium moment. What did I take away? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think right now this is an operator's time right now, and I think people got a little carried away just with the whole mania of DSO valuations and whatnot. And I think ultimately we need to bring it back to there's so much unmet need for dental care, broadly speaking, and we continue to face these barriers, whether it's poor reimbursements, thank you Delta Dental, or Medicaid for those who take Medicaid at any material amount. I just feel like we still are doing really and I include myself in that, even though I'm not a dentist or a doctor. I mean, we're doing really good work and we're changing people's lives. I mean, one of the most meaningful things for me was my dad was a 0014 patient, and the last 11 years of his life were dramatically better than they would have been otherwise. I mean, I've seen that personally, and it is not an exaggeration to say it was life saving, life changing. And so that's just one example that's near and dear to my heart. So I feel like this is good work that we're doing. We're trying to help doctors be more efficient, treat more patients, serve their referrals and their patients more effectively. I think you can, while it's not sexy, working on your systems actually does have rebound or redound quite a significant benefit to you. If you are at all, everybody should be thinking about what their transition is. I mean, even if it's the furthest thing and you're like 35 years old and you're saying, why would I ever want to think about selling? The reality is you kind of always need to be thinking about it in the back of your head. Because if you wait until it's too late, it's gonna show up in your valuation. And there are lots of different kinds of DSOs, right? So we're not evil. You can come talk to us. I'll give you my free opinion, just like Danny did for many, many years, as to what I see goes into creating a valuable, thriving practice. What we've been talking about today here is a huge part of it, getting modern systems that are going to make it easier for us to bring you into the fold is a material part of the valuation consideration. And just frankly, we have to be more selective nowadays, right? We just have to be more, as a DSO, we have to be more selective because the cost of capital has gone up dramatically. It's not the go-go era anymore. And so we're more selective in the deals that we choose to do. Some are in the business of looking for projects, like a fixer-upper that they can get for a deal. From my perspective, I think most of us are not necessarily looking for projects. So sometimes it makes sense to do that remodeling on your own before you're looking for a partner like us. So that's not a great answer to your question, but we just keep plugging away, trying to do it better every day.
I'm sure that I feel we provided, and you provided incredible insight today to what's happening in the market, and we appreciate all the information and sharing every bit of it. So, Isaac, what questions do we have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So both of you have talked about, and Jason, you just mentioned the need to update your platform, make sure your collections data are on point. And I think to a lot of surgeons, that's really scary. So Sam, when you speak to surgeons about migrating their data, what do you tell them? Like, how bad is it? And what makes the difference between a smooth transition versus a really painful one?
I want to say, full data migration, like sometimes really help. Understanding your data, the access to the data really help. Understanding how many years you've been using the data and what do you need out of the data you have historically, so we can make it seamless. At the same time, training, training like having on-site training sometimes help. It's a transition. I always tell people like what makes this transition a lot easier to treat it as such, like give it the time, give your staff the training they need, do the on-site training. I know sometimes, closing the practice for a day and slowing down a little bit is not ideal. We make it seamless, we make it fast, but also providing the appropriate training and giving this the right resources really helps. So, like we try to work with a lot of the surgeons, get a lot of feedback to make the software also user friendly. With the use of AI right now, we have, like you can ask the software anything. We have the training built in, so we can expedite the onboarding. If you forget something, you just can ask the software. The software using AI will tell you exactly where to go and what to do. So that is not also like the past. Helps a lot to bridge the gap and take the anxiety out of like, hey, I have to memorize everything after this one day of training. So yeah.
Got it. Jason, this one's for you. When you're looking at a practice's data in diligence, what are one or two things specifically that you look at first in that data? And what should they be especially keen on making sure they have clean?
It helps to know whether the practice is growing or shrinking. And believe it or not, because most practices, think of collections as revenue. And that's like 100% of all independent dentists and doctors report their revenue as collections. But one thing most people may not realize is all the DSOs are audited accrual based accounting under GAAP, generally accepted accounting practices. And so, believe it or not, we actually have to be able to look at everything from a production standpoint and be able to estimate what percentage of that production we're eventually going to be able to collect, regardless of when we receive it. And so I will tell you that oftentimes that mindset shift, it doesn't mean you should actually change the way you practice, right? But it does mean that we have to do quite a bit of work to estimate what you're actually producing and what we're actually going to collect eventually and use that to report revenue. And believe it or not, that's what EBITDA is based on, not collections, not production. So we have to be able to decode that to get back to basically, disaggregate the P and the Q, the price and the quantity, and we have to be able to get to, is your practice growing? Taking out fee sheet increases, taking out changes in collections behavior. We need to get back to truth, which is your practice growing or not? And how are your referrals growing? So that's the single most determinative thing, I would say, nowadays. I think in the olden days, when I say olden days, 4 years ago, people just said, hey, what's your EBITDA? Here's the multiple. But it's not the way anymore. You have to demonstrate a path to consistent, reliable, organic growth, whether that's increase in procedure counts, increase in conversion rate, increase in doctor days, more efficiency in the schedule. We do spend a lot more time now looking at schedule density and schedule efficiency. So it also helps if you can get that data out of the system and be able to evaluate it. So
Yeah, that's an awesome answer, and this has been an incredible session. I just want to be conscious of time because it is now 6 o'clock Central. It's been a full hour. This flew by. Again, we will be sending the recording for this. It looks like that the questions have stopped. Jason, Sam, I'll let you two have the last word if a moment of inspiration has hit you. But if not, this was an amazing session. So thank you to both of you.
I want to thank you, Jason, for your time. I appreciate you giving us this time and sharing insight. I'm sure that a lot of people will be very grateful to your time and what you have shared today. Here we're at DSN, we've worked with a lot of surgeons for 40 years now. So we're here, we continue to innovate. We're continue, to bring value and trying to get the practices where they need to be, either running a private practice or they want to go enterprise. We're here to support. And Jason, if you have any final or anything you want to say.
Gosh, I mean, I probably have done way too much talking, and I'm sorry for causing us to go long. You know, all I would say is that if anybody does want to ask a question directly, you can always hit me up on LinkedIn. I don't think I'm happy to provide my contact information. No problem whatsoever. I don't know what you think the right protocol is for that, Isaac or Sam, but generally pretty easy to find. And like I said, trying to carry on the legacy that Danny, he showed the way all those years of saying, hey, try to be a resource to the specialty, try to advise new residents coming out of school, just a realistic take on what they are facing. Because it's always remarkable that, if many times doctors have spent upwards of 14 years, head down, focused on, their education, their training, their residency, you name it. And now all of a sudden they're thrust into the sort of shark infested waters of private practice. And I think it's a service to the industry if you can try to be of help and say, hey, you're not alone. You're not the first one who's gone through this. So if you can just give a unbiased, unjaded view of things that have worked and things to consider, generally it's going to work out. It's a great profession. And I would say as a non-surgeon, those who are doing the surgery are doing God's work. And I certainly appreciate the impact you had on my father and on my kids, and happy to play a role. So don't be shy if you want to reach out and ask questions.
Isaac will share the contact information as well with the recording across, right, Isaac?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Will do. Well, again, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Jason. And thank you, everyone, for joining. And have a great rest of your evening.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.